24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Grace Remington here with this beautiful panel of experts. We got Chris Singletary, Coach Carl Reed, and Cooper Petagna, and we are ready to take any and all of your recruiting questions. So make sure to drop those in the chat. The only thing I ask of you is to subscribe to the channel because it's a sub-only chat. So we won't be able to see your questions and get you those important answers if you don't subscribe. So go ahead and do that right now. And guys, while we're waiting for everyone to join the stream, join the party, let's warm up the audience a bit. I love this panel we got here because you all have experience in the recruiting world at different levels. Carl, obviously, you have the perspective of a high school coach. Chris, you went through recruiting as a player, and then both Chris and Cooper, you guys did some work in the front office of several different college programs. So let's just talk about the range of experiences we got here. And Carl, I'll start it off with you because I know you're always good for a story or two. What's the wildest thing or most interesting thing that's happened with one of your high school athletes on the recruiting trail?
I'd say I'd have to go recently, having Toriano Pride at corner at Clemson, being committed to Clemson and having an in-home visit with Dabo Swinney and Brent Venables the day that it was reported that Venables was the front runner for Oklahoma. And the way that Coach Venables and Dabo Swinney, the way that they handled that situation in the house with high school coach, mom, dad, grandfather, grandparents. And I can say this, I asked Coach Venables flat out, was he going to Oklahoma? And the way he handled the situation and the way that he dealt with it and the honesty and forthrightness that he came through it with was something that it will always be important to me in our relationship.
Yeah, it says a lot about how you handle yourself in those moments. Chris, I know the recruiting atmosphere was different when you were going through it. What is one of your memories going through that process?
I think the first thing was just getting to meet all the people, and I think when you look at it from that standpoint, it's the coaches, it's the players. And I started recruiting at a young age. I didn't know it. Met a guy that ended up being my best friend to this day. We were on a visit to Michigan, and come to find out he was taking some visits that I had already been to. So I started recruiting him early. He ended up becoming a star running back for us at Michigan, Chris Howard, from John Curtis High School in River Ridge. So just doing that and being able to find, guys that you wanted to play with. I think the other thing was that I just thought about it when you brought that question up. I didn't realize I was an original flipper. And what I mean by that is I initially committed to UCLA. Went out there, had a tremendous official visit with Coach Donahue and his staff, Tim Hundley, Wayne Nunley, Neuheisel was there, and ultimately decided to stay close to home. And that was the year they had the earthquake in 94. And obviously being from the Midwest and being from Detroit, we're not used to that. So I can deal with some snow and thunderstorms and rain and all that, but earthquakes is not my cup of tea. So I ended up ultimately deciding to go and stay at home and attend the University of Michigan.
That's great. Yeah, I'm not a cold weather person either, but I'll gladly take some snow, some at least it's pretty, and it's not too dangerous. Cooper, you've been in several of these war rooms. When you get to the signing day, the signing period, I mean, it's the end of the season. Everyone's kind of tired at that point. So when you're walking into the room that day, what's kind of the mood? What are you looking forward to? How do you get yourself amped up?
Well, there are a lot of, for us, that's our Super Bowl on the player personnel side. But for the coaches, they're typically in the middle of bowl prep. There's a lot of things going on during that time of year. So, a lot of these guys are really running on fumes, and you would think this day behind the scenes is celebrated. In some places it is, some places it isn't. But in terms of being able to deal with situations that come down to the wire, I remember one that we had at Washington back in either 2019 or 2018 when I was there in Seattle under Chris Peterson. This was a recruitment that just kept going back and forth with one player between us in Notre Dame. And at a lot of points, we had felt like we lost it. At a lot of points, we felt like we pulled back ahead. And it just got to the point where it's like, hey, what are we doing here? So all of those, I would say, fluffy moments earlier in the recruitment push comes to shove, you get to see who everybody is a little bit in that 11th hour. So I'll always remember that. We've had those moments everywhere that I've been. But sometimes these guys just need a little bit of the right nudge. They have so many people in their ears. Then it gets to the time where it's like, hey, we're going to need to answer one way or the other because we got to do what's best for us too.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to some questions now. Thanks everybody for sending them in, and please continue to do so. We'll be here for about the next 25 minutes or so. So we hope to get to all of these. Our first question comes from Timothy Constantino. Cooper, I'll give this one to you. Who outside of Georgia is best positioned to land Deuce Robinson?
Well, I'm not our director of recruiting, Steve Wilfong. This is his area. I'm the analyst, but in terms of the fit and what we've heard, I would say reading the tea leaves, probably USC, Texas as well. I know is still working there, but I think the one thing to consider is we keep hearing how important baseball is to Deuce Robinson. I mean, he had, along with 11 other players, the opportunity to work out in front of the Los Angeles Dodgers earlier this January. This is a guy that a lot of people in the MLB think that he has the physical tools to one day develop into a top round 1 or round 2 MLB draft prospect. So when you take that into consideration, I think that's the elephant in the room with Deuce Robinson. How are you going to balance that? We've seen this before with dual sport athletes. Once the MLB comes calling, there's a lot of guaranteed money on the line, especially if you're going to be a potential early draft pick. So I think that's kind of what Deuce Robinson is navigating through right now. I think Georgia's in a great spot, but I think it's USC, Texas, even with USC getting a commitment from Walker Lyons today.
Even when these guys are deciding whether to enter the NFL draft or go to the MLB, you see there's always that conversation about the guaranteed money versus the injury risk. I remember having that conversation with Kyler Murray a few years ago. But let's go to the next question. Chris, I'll give you this one because it's about Michigan. From Marvin Johnson. He says, I'm from Peoria, Illinois. My question is, what caused my Michigan Wolverines to have a poor recruiting class? And will we turn it around next year with potentially Jaden Davis leading the way?
I don't call it poor. I call it the mindset of Jim Harbaugh and his philosophy. And I think when you look at it, when you couple what they've done the last few years, not only recruiting from a high school level, but also recruiting from the level of the transfer portal, you see how they have a culmination of the best of both worlds. Michigan's not a school that's going to be able to attract guys from the junior college ranks. And I think for them, when you look at Harbaugh and his mindset and his culture building, it's about the fit. They could have got one or two difference makers. They went all the way down to the wire in the hunt for a guy like Nicholas Harbor. But I think when you look at the guys that they did pick up in the fits, it's always about that. Because at the end of the day, when you really look at where they have taken the program in the last 2 years now, being in contention to win the national title, going to the playoffs, winning back-to-back Big Ten championships, they feel very comfortable with their blueprint. But they're ultimately going to have to get one or two of those difference makers, obviously, to get over that hump, which is to ultimately win that national title. But I think when you look at what they've done, you look at the culture and the fit and the blueprint, they're very comfortable there in terms of how they've been attracting recruits and finishing out the day signing day.
Yeah, and we know Jim Harbaugh is all about development as well. Staying in the Big Ten, Carl, here's one for you from Big Cheese. Starting next year, do you think Wisconsin can have a perennial top 20 recruiting class with Luke Fickell?
Well, I think that it's going to be hard for Wisconsin to be perennially in the top 20 just because of the landscape of recruiting. And when you talk about the top 20, are you talking about high school kids or are you talking about the combination of high school and transfer portal guys? One of the things that when we talk about recruiting now, Wisconsin doesn't have a huge local footprint of guys in state that are big time, highly rated recruits. It's 1 or 2 guys a year. So guys that you consistently see in the top 10 to 20, they normally have a great geographical footprint there. I think that Luke Fickell in Wisconsin are going to be very similar to what Chris just described with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. They're going to find great fits, big offensive linemen, big backs, guys that fit the way that they want to play football, the culture of Wisconsin, the culture of the Big Ten, great defense, great run game. I think they're going to always do a great job of identifying and developing guys, but that won't always play out well in the national rankings.
All right, let's get to some more questions. And remember, everyone, this is a sub-only chat. So that's how we're going to see your questions and get you those answers you need. So subscribe to the 24 Sports YouTube channel and join us here in the chat. Our next question from Andrew M. Cooper for you. Will Mateo or Rod Pleasant make the bigger impact at Oregon next year?
That's a great question. And I would say probably lean towards Mateo just because of where he is and his physical development. This is a guy that I think in Oregon, in the Pac-12, you can't have enough of these bodies. So these bigger pass rushers, even though he's a little bit raw, I think this is a guy that could find his way into the mix, playing for Oregon a healthy bit past the midway point in the season. Now, Roderick Pleasant is a guy that's also going to find his way on the field because of his pure speed. I think we've seen that three-phase player. The other thing you can't discount with him is his ability in the return game. He's very dynamic there. I think he's more of a slot nickel corner. I think Oregon's done a really good job building some depth in the secondary, and that's what you want. You want a situation where Roderick Pleasant, even a guy as talented as him, doesn't have to step in day one and be relied upon. You get to see some natural development there at the cornerback position. But if it were me and I had to bet my money, I think Mateo right now, that's something that they need. They need bigger bodies with pass rushing upside.
Let's stay on Oregon for a second, because I remember when Lincoln Riley went over to USC, he had this fancy slogan, "Take back the West," but it seems Dan Lanning had other plans. Their class with the commitment from Roderick Pleasant today shot up to number 8 nationally. And you look at the breakdown by location of some of these recruits. I mean, they're coming from 6 of them from Texas. You have a guy from Mississippi, 1 from Florida, 1 from DC. They have 3 of the top 10 recruits in Arizona, and then obviously they have their West Coast footprint. But Chris, I'll ask you this. When you look at just the variety of location there, obviously Lanning has Southern ties being at Georgia. How does that help Oregon being able to recruit cross country?
When you look at Oregon, it's a brand. It's a brand that's just coast to coast. You also look at the success that they've had on the field, and it translates. This day and age with kids constantly traveling around the country via 707, unofficial visits, things of that nature, they're not afraid. They also have been exposed to different places, to different settings outside of their maybe 5-hour radius. And then again, the success that Oregon has had on the field, you also look at the national promise, the brand of Nike being, headquartered right there in Eugene and in Portland. And so now you take a Dan Lanning, you bring him out of the Southeast and you think there may be some drop off. Well, there isn't. And then from the standpoint, Oregon has always found their niche of the ability to be able to recruit from a national perspective. And now it's about this, the opportunity to play at a high level. And Dan Lanning came in, he did a tremendous job in year 1, still had no drop off, put those guys in contention. And so now ultimately at the end of the day, players want to play, they want to be coached, they want to be developed, and they want to have an opportunity to win. So I think it's a culmination of guys not afraid to travel because they're used to exposure, whether it is they're personally getting on that campus, and then also from the standpoint of national TV, they see Oregon all the time as one of those brands. So it's something that's always intriguing, and that every kid, kind of like an Alabama or Georgia, if they're getting recruited by those schools, they want to experience it. And then once they get them on campus, they have done a tremendous job of locking those guys in.
I don't know if you guys saw, but after the signing day in December, Dan Lanning posted a video of himself smoking a cigar and just like totally fogging up the camera. Because I mean, he had reason to celebrate, but I think he's 36 years old. He obviously relates to young kids well. Carl, why do you think he's so successful?
He's very honest. He's very relatable. I've known him for a long time. He does have ties to the South. He's been at the University of Memphis. He's been a GA at Alabama. He's been at Georgia. He also did a year at Pitt, and he's from the Midwest. He's originally from Kansas City. When he sits down with kids, he's very honest. He's one of the few head coaches that still has remained a relatable guy when he moved from the assistant seat to the head seat. He's got a lot of energy. He brings a lot of excitement. He's a football coach. He's going to have a great run there at the University of Oregon, and he can really sell it. Chris hit on it earlier. Oregon is a national brand. How many uniform combinations do they have? You have the founder of Nike being one of your biggest supporters. Those are things that are important to kids. Now, for years, we've had big-time events. The Nike Opening used to be on that campus as well. it's an exciting time for Oregon and Dan Lanning, but he is really relatable to the kids, and he's a guy that a lot of people want to play for right now.
All right, before we move on to the next question, I want to remind everyone watching to like this video. If you like these guys on your screen, if you like me, hopefully, if you like these schools that we're talking about, throw us a like and also subscribe to the 24 Sports YouTube channel because the chat is sub only. That's how you get your questions in there. Cooper, next question for you from Marvin Johnson. What's your grade for Notre Dame's recruiting class and who are the biggest standouts?
I love what they've done. I got to give a lot of credit to Marcus Freeman and listen, when everything transpired with Brian Kelly going to Baton Rouge, and I know that kind of caught a lot of people off guard there. You know, the thought is that Marcus Freeman was going to bring Notre Dame into the new age of college football. I think he's done that, and I really love the job he's done. I mean, Notre Dame finishing with a top 10 class as it stands right now, but I think they've upgraded their roster from top to bottom in height, weight, speed. That is the baseline principle in college football when you're trying to build a roster, and I think they've done that. Also love what Notre Dame has done up front on the offensive line. Charles Jagasaw is a guy that was in and outside the top 32 a little bit, but still a top 50 player for us. I think you look on the defensive side, a late ad that they had, Brandon Hillman out of the state of Virginia was a guy that really stood out in the process. Boubacar Traore, got to give a lot of credit to defensive line coach Al Washington, right? So they've found their niche. They're a national program. They have to recruit coast to coast. And when you're recruiting, you know, it's all about fit at Notre Dame South Bend. It's a very particular place. It's pretty similar to how we were at Washington, just trying to recruit to a consistent philosophy of character in OKG, our kind of guys. And I think Marcus Freeman has kind of gone through some hiccups, and you can look at the L's that they've had, if you want to call it that. But Dante Moore, Keon Keeley, Peyton Bowen, those type of guys, listen, I give them a lot of credit for even stepping in the arena and stepping up to the bat and having to go against programs like Alabama and Oklahoma to really fight and try to get some of these guys that can change the trajectory of their program. And the only answer for that, people keep talking about that, what do they need to do differently? Well, they need to win more games on the field. You keep developing players and putting them in the NFL. He's not going to have an issue doing that. So I think he's punching above his weight right now. I love what he's doing. He's a tenacious recruiter. He's very charismatic. And I think the arrow is only pointing up for the Irish.
Our next question, Chris, you can take this one. Rumors are that Nicholas Harbor might actually play wide receiver at South Carolina. Does he have the ball skills necessary to play at wideout?
I think Nicholas Harbor can do anything that Nicholas Harbor puts his mind to. You're talking about a guy, obviously, with tremendous athleticism, and the ball skill piece of it is reps. It's reps. It's focusing on the point of the ball. It's just constantly doing it at a high clip. I think when you look at his athleticism, you putting a guy like that on the perimeter, kind of like the Falcons do with Kyle Pitts, and it's an instant mismatch. And immediately the DB is going to back up off of him because he's going to kill him with the cushion, being able to be explosive off the ball. And so I'm saying this is a guy, whether it's the comeback, the slant route, obviously the 50-50 jump ball, he easily can play on the perimeter. I think the ball skills is just a thing of reps, constantly focusing on how to catch the ball, really focusing on catching it first before getting up the field and using that explosiveness. So I'll tell you this, I would be excited to see him on the perimeter because I don't think there's anybody, just obviously we already know from a physical stature, who can man up Nicholas Harbor. So he will always be a guy that you're playing with a press corner and a safety over the top to help because he can pop it.
Crazy.
Yeah, obviously, Nicholas Harbor, the biggest news of the day, the freakiest athlete out there. Carl, have you ever seen a high school recruit who looks like Nicholas Harbor?
No, not a guy who can run the way that he can run in terms of his natural track speed with the size and intangibles he have. One of the greatest players that I ever saw from a two-way standout, I would probably go LeVar Arrington. I'd be going way back in terms of a guy that I felt like could have played linebacker or tailback, and he would have been a first-round pick at either position. You know, so I would say Harbaugh has that type of freaky athleticism where he could do what Chris said, anything on the football field that he puts his mind to. When you're a big-time football player like that, one of the most difficult things for a coaching staff to decide is where to play you. when LeVar Arrington was recruited to Penn State, they could have done a number of things with him. He could have rushed the passer. He could have played Mike Backer. He could have played tailback. He probably could have played tight end. He was going to excel in however they chose to use him. So South Carolina's got some options with a very, very special young player.
Yeah, South Carolina on the come up. What a cycle for them. All right, Cooper, I'll give you this next one from KT Lloyd. And this is always a fun one to ask about Alabama because they don't rebuild, they just reload. From KT Floyd, which recruits could see the field early in Alabama?
Well, where do you want to start, man? I mean, you can start with Caden Proctor, the #1 offensive lineman in the country. The reason I say that, even though that's pretty rare that you see somebody from Iowa come down to the SEC, be able to plug and play, is that physically he's ready to go. And Alabama needs him ready to go sooner rather than later. But outside of that, I think Keon Keeley, that's easy. That's the #1 defensive prospect in the country. But the guy that is tailor-made for this question is Caleb Downs. I mean, you're talking about one of the most versatile defensive players in all of the country. A safety out of the state of Georgia.
Chris, make a comment once
player, has all the accolades that you could possibly imagine. And a guy that can play in the box, he can play the deep hash. He's physical at the point of attack, and he's just kind of a ball magnet. So I think that's a guy, you know, you start to kind of trend back a little bit. I think Justice Haynes on the offensive side of the ball, this is a guy that's day one ready in the SEC. We had a lot of conversations. Is he a 5-star? Do we include him? He just checks all the boxes from genetics. His dad got drafted 5th round, played for the University of Georgia. Justice Haynes ends up going to Alabama, so I know that stings for a little bit. Was a baseball player, threw 86 miles per hour on the mound, and then on top of that, in my opinion, he's the best 3-down back in the country. Can do a little bit of everything, and I think this is a dude that you're just going to struggle to keep off the field. He's too good. I love him. I think Alabama needs a little bit of juice in the running game, so I think all those guys, that's what happens when you're Nick Saban. You got an embarrassment of riches. I mean, they're in a really, really good spot, and I think they're going to have to be, for the first time in a while, lean on some of these dudes, especially some of the guys that they got ranked in the top 100.
I'm really curious to see how some of these young pass rushers develop. I think with losing Will Anderson and really needing depth, if you watch the two teams that are playing in the Super Bowl, not only they're strong and stout in the middle, but they also have abundance of pass rushers. And I think when you look at guys like Jans Pierre and Quay Russoff, those are guys that really can take that next step early and really just let their lateral ability to be able to rush the passer become a factor for them early in their career at Alabama. So I'm excited to see how these two guys possibly can factor into early playing time. But I am a huge fan of Caleb Downs. You're talking about a quarterback on the back end. I mean, Coop hit on it. I mean, Caleb Downs, I mean, to me, he's one of the safest picks. Not picks per se, but safest players in this year's class. And I think, you know, him quarterbacking that secondary is going to be huge for them.
Guys, recruiting always starts up front. We know that. Caden Proctor, the big offensive lineman out of Iowa, he's going to be a guy that I expect to have a huge impact right away. Can pass block, can run block, and it chose to go into the fray and play in the SEC West, the toughest division in college football. I'm really excited to see what the young offensive lineman does in his true freshman year at Alabama.
Carl, I got another one for you. This is from PJA, and this is an interesting one because we don't often see people turn down an opportunity to coach at Alabama. But this question is, what do you make of Ryan Grubb turning down Nick Saban for Alabama's OC job?
You know, one of the things about the coordinator position at the University of Alabama, it's often known that Coach Saban has made coordinators over the years adjust to the way he wants to do things in terms of the terminology not changing so you can have continuity with the kids. And that works for some guys, but it's just not a fit for everybody. And so there are situations where guys want to be able to go in and they want to be able to paint it and write the script exactly the way they want to. And they don't necessarily want to be in a situation where they have to adjust the terminology and adjust to somebody else's way of doing things. And I can say this, though, the way that Coach Saban has done it with all of the change that he's had on the staff, coordinators, position coach, it's worked out pretty well for him at Alabama. And I'm sure that they'll find the right guy.
All right, got a fun one here. And all of you guys, I would love to hear your take on this. Cooper, we'll start with you. Question from Jason H. We've seen Ivan's freak list. Who would be at the top of yours?
I saw that in the chat and it was getting my mind going a little bit. But I would have to go back to my days at Michigan, a head-to-head battle that we went, really hard at with Ohio State. I don't even know if you can mention that. Chris, you can tell me that if I'm wrong for mentioning Ohio State's name there. But Zach Harrison was another guy with an elite track and field background that we really liked. Jason Oweh, who ended up getting picked in the first round for the Baltimore Ravens, and then for me at the University of Washington, Trent McDuffie was about as clean of a prospect as you'll see. He was a three-phase player at St. John Bosco, elite competition there. Servite, before he was at Bosco, had an awesome track and field background. This is a guy that could play any position on the field, had a ton of production. I mean, the list kind of goes on. Roma Dunze was in that as well. Jalen McMillan was a very good baseball player. So just kind of going through the Rolodex in my mind, I think Zach Harrison was kind of the guy that we were always infatuated with. Like, hey, if this guy puts it together, there's a chance. And the other one, Julius Welschoff from Germany, international, had a crazy skiing background. And this was a guy that came to camp, worked out for us. We ended up taking at the end of the day. So you just never know. But there's about 5 or 6 of them. Hopefully that's good enough.
Chris, go.
I'm going to give you 2. Both were unique guys. One is Jabril Peppers. He was a guy out of high school who legitimately
Carl, go after Chris.
Anywhere on the field, whether it was running back, receiver, safety, corner, in the 3-3-5, he could play nickel backer. I mean, and so he was a Swiss Army knife before there was Swiss Army knives. And when I say the ultra competitor of that I had seen since the last time of a guy with the mindset of being a winner like a Charles Woodson type was Jabril Peppers. And then the other one was Taylor Lewan from here in the state of Arizona. He was a guy that played defensive line the majority of his high school career. When he came to Michigan, he had played 1 year, I believe, of offensive line. He was only 260 pounds, but his ability to bend, the flexibility and the length that he had, and then the tenacity and the mindset. He was one of those guys that you knew from his mindset, even though he was playing offensive line, he had a defensive mindset in terms of his competitiveness, his toughness. So, and then just a genetic freak. I mean, so when you look at the 2 that I can think of off the top of my head, I would go with Jabril Peppers and with Taylor Lewan.
When you start talking about freaks and you've coached and you've seen a lot of great guys like Chris and Cooper will tell you, a few guys come to mind. For me, one of the freakiest guys I ever saw, I would go with Jeff Thomas, who was a wide receiver at East St. Louis High School, went on to the University of Miami. Just his total body control, as fast as he was, won the fastest man competition at the Nike Open and against all of the great players in the country. And a guy that we didn't get to see a lot of because he struggled with injuries throughout college was Cameron Babb, a receiver that plays at Ohio State. 4 ACL tears, ended up still being a captain at Ohio State. But he is a guy that we really got robbed because of injuries of seeing how great he was going to be. A guy that's one of the best high school receivers I've ever seen. He was a state champion in the long jump and track and field. Just a complete freak athlete that injuries kind of took his career away, but he still ended up making an impact and being a captain at Ohio State. But he was a freaky dude.
There should be like an all-time freaks list. I mean, a lot of good choices there. Cooper, our next question, who is this from? From Andrew Mormon. Who ends up with the most receptions next year? Jurion Dickey at Oregon or Zach Branch for USC?
That's a great question. I'm going to go and listen. The first thing I thought about was Bo Nix, and all right, who's the other guy? Then you said USC. That's Caleb Williams, right? So I love Lincoln Riley's offense, especially for freshmen. I think we've seen in the past, even dating back to his time in Oklahoma, he's not afraid to play young guys, especially if these guys can make an impact early. Zachariah Branch is the definition of plug and play. I mean, this is a guy from an athletic and from a speed standpoint, he's pretty transcendent. He's just a game changer, lightning in a bottle. And I have the most confidence in Lincoln Riley and when it comes to being able to deploy his playmakers, put them in the best position to succeed. But I love that question. I think Jurion Dickey's going to be a menace up in Eugene. But I think Zachariah Branch, that's a guy that they're just going to have to find a way to get the ball early.
Chris, I saw you had a reaction to that, so I have to know your thoughts.
I agree. But the other thing is Jurion Dickey is not far off. I think he is definitely in a contention to put himself as receiver one when he gets to Eugene. I think what I saw that I liked about him when I got an opportunity to see him in person was his physical stature. I mean, he is well put together. He's thick up top, well defined. You know, he's able to show that even as a bigger kid, a bigger player, he's able to drop his weight, get in and out of his breaks. His competitiveness at the catch point, 50-50 ball, strong hands. And so I think he puts himself in contention, like I said, to be receiver one. And then also with Bo Nix coming back, I think he's going to have even more confidence in that offense. And I think he can be a guy that really could be in contention to put up some numbers. It's all going to come down to how acclimated they all become with the new offensive coordinator down there in Eugene. And then Zachariah Branch is just a freak. I mean, he is Tyreek Hill 2.0. He is what you want. He's tough. He's physical. He's fast. And both of them in the football world, we call both of those guys dogs in a good way.
Yeah. Either way, it's going to be some good times in Pac-12 After Dark next season. All right, Carl, take us home here. There is no College Football Today show. So what are you mad at today?
I am mad that we still have guys that are picking college football programs solely for NIL instead of looking at the true football experience that they're going with. We still want to remind guys, and Chris and Cooper will both tell you this as well, we still want players that are looking for the best fit from a football standpoint, from an educational standpoint, from a coaching staff standpoint, people that are going to give you an incredible experience. NIL money is there, it's here to stay, and although money is good and everybody wants a little piece of it, please just take care of the opportunity to provide yourself with an experience. I've heard Chris on this show, I've heard Cooper on this show with me talk about relationships, always going back to guys like Chris Howard that you played with, Devin Gardner. Those relationships are things that are going to go on for the rest of your life. So don't miss out on what college really is in the experience that you can have with the people that are going to be a part of your life. Always keep that in mind as you move forward, because this is a people business, and the relationships that you'll build today, those are the guys that are going to be the best men in your wedding. It sounds cliche, but those are going to be the men that are going to help you get jobs and that are going to be the godfathers to your kids. So although the business is always at the forefront, keep in mind that relationships always matter.
Words of wisdom from Coach Carl, and that is why you need to tune in to the 24/7 Sports channel. That is why you need to subscribe and like this video, because you always get the best insight from all these guys on your screen. So Carl Reed, Chris Singletary, Cooper Petagna, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone for dropping your questions, interacting with us today. We're not done yet, though. It's a huge, busy day here at 24/7 Sports headquarters. Up next on the channel, we got 4-star quarterback Austin Mack announcing his commitment live at 4:45 Eastern. Our National Signing Day recap show is right after that at 5 o'clock Eastern. And then after that, we're shutting it down with another commitment, 4-star linebacker William Spencer at 6:30. So the news don't stop, the grind don't stop here at 24/7 Sports. Great seeing you guys. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you here soon.